Why do humans always seem to sit at the back of the universe? It's a question that baffled the rest of the galaxy for centuries. Other species, far more advanced in technology and warcraft, couldn't fathom why Earth's inhabitants had taken such a backseat in galactic matters. Humans, who once seemed like nothing more than a blip in the grand cosmic scale, were mysteriously content to stay in their corner, untouched by the unfolding intergalactic chaos. The universe, rich with its powerful empires and bold civilizations, found Earth's self-imposed isolation almost laughable. They couldn't understand how a species so unassuming, so seemingly weak, could ever have a seat at the table of universal significance. But when the galactic powers started to take notice, when they sent their scouts to observe, they underestimated something very human. They underestimated a quiet, unyielding resilience that had never fully revealed itself. For decades, humanity lived under the radar, barely even noticed by the ancient and powerful species that dominated space. But something was changing. And as the galaxy found out, that underestimation would come with dire consequences. It all started with a signal, a faint hum sent out by a lone human vessel, the first of its kind to break through the galactic perimeter. No one took it seriously. Why would they? The humans had no significant fleet, no vast armies, nothing that could challenge the established order. It was just another attempt by a fringe race trying to claim its place. But then came the reports from scout ships, more human vessels, more than anyone had expected. And they were not alone. The humans had begun something that the galaxy had never anticipated. They were organizing, strategizing, and pushing back. What was once a tiny corner of the galaxy, a small blue planet hiding in the shadows, suddenly became the focal point of an entirely different kind of war. A war not of weapons, but of will, determination, and an incredible willpower to survive. The galaxy's oldest empires, which had sat on their thrones for millennia, suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders. Humans had learned more than just survival. They had mastered the art of waiting. But now, as the dust settles and the first waves of confrontation rise on the horizon, the truth is undeniable. The galaxy had forgotten that humans, despite their quiet nature, had always been prepared for one thing above all. They would never be content to simply sit at the back. And when they finally rose, the galaxy would tremble. As the first human fleets leave the safety of their home system, no one knows what to expect next. Will they bring peace, or will they bring an entirely new kind of power to the galaxy? The answer is just out of reach. But one thing is for certain, the galaxy has made a grave mistake underestimating humanity. The question now is, how far will they go to prove it? And when the time comes, will the galaxy be ready? Next time, we uncover what happens when humanity finally reveals what they've been hiding all along. The galaxy had long since moved on from the idea of Earth as anything more than a primitive rock, barely worthy of acknowledgement. It was one of the smallest, most inconsequential planets in the Milky Way, buried in the outer spiral arm, far from the power centers that define galactic history. The dominant species had evolved into complex interstellar empires, their influence stretching across countless star systems, their technologies far beyond anything humans could imagine. Yet, despite all their advancements, they had never once considered humanity a serious threat. Humanity had remained isolated, a species distracted by its own struggles, wars, politics, and a series of devastating global crises that seemed to keep them grounded. For centuries, they had focused on the survival of their own planet, not bothering to reach out, let alone compete in the vast political theater of the stars. They didn't have the enormous fleets, the mind-bending technology, or the ancient wisdom of other species. They had only one thing, an incredible capacity to endure. It was something the galaxy didn't fully understand yet, but the humans had learned. In their small, quiet way, they had been building for the future, preparing in the shadows, and when the time came, they would prove to the galaxy that their power wasn't in their military might, but in their ingenuity. They had mastered the art of adaptation, and this, more than anything, had made them dangerous. The rest of the universe had yet to realize that while they were busy enjoying the fruits of their civilizations, humans were quietly watching, learning, and waiting. For decades, the quiet hum of human technology, once seen as insignificant, began to change. First, It was a slow shift. A new type of ship, small at first, but undeniably more efficient. A weapon here, a system there, all designed to exploit the most basic strengths of humanity, survival, innovation, and resilience. But the galaxy didn't notice. They didn't care. The first major revelation came when Earth launched a series of communication probes beyond their solar system. They sent out encrypted messages, harmless at first, appearing as little more than radio signals to anyone who might listen. It wasn't a message of conquest, but of curiosity. The humans were testing the waters, gauging the reaction of the galaxy to their presence. And to their surprise, the galaxy took notice, but not in the way they expected. It started with the Chur, an ancient race who controlled over 30 star systems. They were proud and mighty, their fleets a symbol of indomitable power. When they intercepted the first human signal, they laughed. What could these fragile beings possibly want with them? The Chur were so confident that they sent a fleet to Earth's solar system, not out of fear, but out of amusement. Their ships came, but the humans weren't there to meet them in force. Instead, they greeted them with silence. And then, one by one, the Chur ships began to malfunction. Weapons systems went offline, engines sputtered, and their once mighty ships turned adrift, powerless. The Chur were the first to realize something they had never considered. Earth wasn't just a primitive backwater. It was a place of unremarkable genius, where human resilience had created something far more dangerous than any weapon. And as their fleet fell, one by one, their commanders realized that the humans had developed something far beyond what any of them could have imagined, a way to turn their technology against them. The message was clear. Earth was no longer a place of quiet obscurity. It had become something much darker, something that could and would fight back. The Chur's fleet, once considered an unstoppable force, was only the beginning. As they retreated, the galaxy began to whisper. Rumors of Earth's sudden emergence spread fast. The older empires began to look nervously to their own defenses. What would happen when humans unleashed the full extent of their potential? Yet, even as the galaxy reeled, something far more pressing was happening behind the scenes. The humans were preparing, not just for war, but for something far bigger, a game-changing revelation that no one could have predicted. And then, as all eyes turned to Earth, it happened. A message broadcast from the center of human space, a beacon of light and sound. It wasn't a plea for help, nor a declaration of war. It was a challenge. To everyone who thought they knew Earth, the game was just beginning. And no one, not even the humans themselves, knew where it would lead. The broadcast from Earth sent ripples across the galaxy. At first, it was dismissed as nothing more than a warning shot, an idle threat from a species that had barely made a dent in the vastness of space. But as the weeks went on, and more planets fell silent in response to Earth's audacious challenge, something began to shift. The empires that had ruled for millennia started to feel the weight of their complacency, and with it, the cold, creeping fear that maybe, just maybe, they had misjudged humanity. The Chur, still licking their wounds from their disastrous encounter, were the first to formally respond. They weren't afraid, at least not outwardly. But the fact that a race so young had disrupted their highly advanced fleet caused even the most stoic commanders to question their assumptions. A secretive council of Chur elites was convened, and as they deliberated, their thoughts turned darker. They knew they couldn't let humanity continue to grow unchecked. Earth had demonstrated its ability to destabilize their carefully crafted dominance, and that was something no empire could tolerate. While the Chur plotted their next move, the humans on Earth were grappling with the same uncertainty. Their technology had progressed rapidly in the past few decades, but it wasn't just their machines that had changed. Humanity had undergone something far deeper, a collective shift. The generations that had grown up isolated on their tiny planet, too often struggling to make sense of their place in the cosmos, were now united by a singular purpose. The human spirit, once thought weak in comparison to the might of the galactic powers, was now the driving force behind their most secretive and ambitious projects. But there was still so much they didn't know. They had never intended to confront the galaxy in such a way, but now that they had, there was no going back. The broadcast had been the brainchild of a small group of human strategists, many of whom had been working in the shadows for years. They were scientists, engineers, and military leaders who understood the risk, but also saw the opportunity. Earth's sudden exposure to the galactic stage was calculated. The message was clear: we are not here to fight. But if we must, we will do so on our own terms. Yet beneath this calm exterior was a growing uncertainty. Could they really face down the galaxy's most powerful forces? Or had they just made an enemy of everyone? Meanwhile, on the outskirts of human space, in a remote colony far from Earth's gaze, a different kind of rebellion was brewing. A group of colonists, disillusioned with Earth's government and its sudden thirst for galactic power, were beginning to question whether humanity's place among the stars was a blessing or a curse. They had watched as their homeworld transformed from a struggling, isolated species to an entity that threatened to disrupt the balance of power in the entire galaxy. These colonists had no stake in the political game Earth was playing. They wanted peace, they wanted independence, and they feared that Earth's newfound ambitions would drag them into a war they had no desire to fight. At the same time, the galaxy's older powers, some of them aware of humanity's growing capabilities, began to reassess their stance. The Narath, a species known for their psychic abilities, had long been the silent overseers of galactic order. They could feel the disturbance caused by Earth's message. It wasn't just the ships or the technology, it was the humans themselves. Something had awoken in them, something raw and untapped. The Narath, who prided themselves on their ability to predict the future, found themselves unsure for the first time. They had never encountered a species with such unpredictable potential. And as the factions of the galaxy adjusted to the looming threat, something even more unsettling was beginning to unfold. Deep within the heart of Earth's space stations, a hidden weapon was nearing completion, an invention so powerful, so dangerous, that even its creators feared its consequences. It had been designed as a last resort, a safeguard against galactic retaliation, but the closer it came to activation, the more questions began to surface. Would this weapon give humanity the upper hand, or would it lead them down a path of no return? In a dark corner of Earth's military command, a high-ranking officer stood before a holographic map of the galaxy. He stared at the blinking lights that represented human outposts and enemy fleets. It was only a matter of time before the first battle would occur, an inevitable confrontation between humanity's fragile but determined forces and the galaxy's seasoned warriors. The officer knew they were outmatched in terms of sheer strength. But there was something he had learned during his time training human soldiers. It was never about the weapons or the fleets. It was about the will to fight. And humanity had that in abundance. But as the officer turned away from the map, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about survival anymore. Something deeper was at play, something no one had anticipated. The human race was no longer just defending its home. It was on the cusp of becoming something else, something far greater, or far darker. And as the first fleets began to assemble, the galaxy waited. What would humanity choose when faced with the full weight of its decision? Would they unite, or would they fracture under the pressure? The answer was still elusive, hidden in the heart of the storm that was about to break. The tension in the galaxy had reached a boiling point. Every corner of space was on edge, awaiting the inevitable clash. Earth had sent its message, and while some had hoped it would simply be forgotten, they were wrong. The galaxy couldn't forget what humanity had done. The challenge had been thrown, and now every empire, every species, was considering its next move. On Earth, the air was thick with uncertainty. The government was divided. Some saw the human message as a necessary step in asserting their place in the universe, while others feared it would lead to ruin. Despite their internal struggles, Earth's military forces were preparing as if they had no choice but to fight. The top officers gathered in secret councils, debating how far they were willing to go. The weapon, still incomplete, loomed over them like a dark promise. It was their ace in the hole, a last resort, but with each passing day, more of humanity's moral compass seemed to erode. Could they truly unleash such devastation? The question gnawed at them. At the same time, the resistance among the colonies grew louder. Those who had once pledged loyalty to Earth were beginning to fracture. They had been used as pawns, sent to the farthest reaches of space to manage resources and maintain outposts. Now, Those same colonies were preparing to defy Earth's ambitions. But they faced a dilemma of their own. Would they risk open rebellion? Their ability to stand alone was questionable. The larger empires would crush them if they tried. Some began to consider whether it was better to ally with the Chur or even the Narath, despite their distrust of galactic powers. Meanwhile, the Chur, still nursing their wounded pride, prepared for a counterstrike. They couldn't let humanity's defiance go unanswered. There were whispers among the Chur fleet of a preemptive invasion, a quick strike, overwhelming and brutal. Their warlords debated tactics, each more ruthless than the last. The Chur saw Earth as nothing more than an inconvenience, a nuisance to be extinguished before it could grow into a threat. But even as they made their plans, doubts began to creep in. Could they truly eradicate humanity, or had they already underestimated them once? Far away, in the depths of the Narath domain, their seers gathered in their sacred chambers, peering into the uncertain future. The presence of humanity was like a shadow they couldn't escape. The Narath were adept at seeing patterns, predicting movements, but humanity's unpredictability unnerved them. They were not like any other species they had encountered. Their resilience was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. What was it about humans that made them so different? So impossible to predict? As Earth's military fleets assembled at the edge of their solar system, ready for what was almost certain to be the start of intergalactic war, something unexpected happened. A new signal, faint but unmistakable, broke through the radio waves. It wasn't from Earth, nor any of the known species. It came from deep within uncharted space. A new player, one that no one had seen before, had entered the game. The signal was a simple message, yet it was enough to send shockwaves across the galaxy. It read, "We have watched. We have learned. We are the next step." The galaxy froze. What was this new species? Where had they come from? How had they managed to remain hidden for so long? Earth's leaders scrambled to decipher the message, even as their own fleets prepared for the worst. Was this a warning? An ally? Or a new adversary ready to stake a claim in the conflict that was about to erupt? As the human fleets stood poised to engage the Chur and whatever other forces the galaxy would throw at them, they were blindsided by the new signal. The shock was palpable, and for a brief moment, all the calculations, all the strategies, became irrelevant. No one had prepared for this. The weapon, once a last resort, was now at the center of every discussion. Would it be enough to secure humanity's place? Or would they find themselves caught in a conflict they couldn't control? The countdown to war had begun. The alliances were unstable, the motivations unclear, and now an unknown force loomed in the shadows. The tension could be felt across every star system as the galaxy held its breath, uncertain of what would come next. Would humanity find a way to survive, or would they be crushed under the weight of forces far beyond their control? The fleets were ready, but so was something else. Something humanity had never seen coming. And in the cold vacuum of space, where alliances shift like the stars, anything could happen. The next move would be critical. But as the signal from the unknown source echoed through the galaxy, one question remained: were the humans truly ready for what lay ahead? Or had they simply set the stage for the greatest battle the galaxy had ever known? As the galaxy braced for the inevitable clash between Earth and its many enemies, the unexpected signal continued to reverberate throughout every corner of space. No one could ignore it. The unknown species had thrust themselves into the center of the storm, leaving every power in the galaxy scrambling to understand what they had just unleashed. Tensions were already running high, but now, with this new, mysterious player emerging from the depths of uncharted space, everything had changed. On Earth, panic began to set in. The military leaders, once so confident in their plans, found themselves unsure of what to do next. The Chur had already mobilized their forces. The resistance from the colonies had turned into an open rebellion, and now this new species was lurking in the shadows, its intentions unclear. No one could predict how this unknown force might tip the scales. Earth's leaders, once so determined to fight, began to question everything. What if this was all a mistake? What if they weren't ready for the war they were about to face? The broadcast from the mysterious species, though brief, was enough to send ripples of fear and uncertainty across the galaxy. We have watched. We have learned. We are the next step. These simple words sent waves of speculation through every empire. Were they a new ally? A fresh, untested force in the galaxy, eager to stake their claim? Or, as many feared, were they yet another enemy, one with far more power than anyone could comprehend? And then, just as the galaxy seemed to hold its collective breath, something unimaginable happened. The fleet's Earths, the Churs, the colonies, and the Nariths received a second transmission. This time, the voice wasn't from the unknown species. It was human, but not any human they knew. The transmission, seemingly broadcast from Earth itself, came from a deep space outpost, one that had been abandoned for years. The voice was distorted, crackling through static, but the message was clear. The weapon is activated. The time is now. We are ready. The galaxy will fall, and it will be by our hand. This wasn't a message from Earth's leadership. It wasn't from any of the known factions that had been preparing for the coming war. No, this message was from something else, someone else. A faction, hidden away for years, that had been working on their own agenda. Their motives were unclear, but one thing was certain: they had taken control of the weapon, the one that had been humanity's last resort, and they were ready to use it. The stakes had just been raised, and no one knew what would happen next. The shockwave that followed was felt by everyone. The Chur, already preparing their assault on Earth, halted their advance, unsure whether they were facing a true enemy or an ally they hadn't anticipated. The Narith, who had been quietly watching humanity's rise, began to reconsider their position. They had seen potential in humanity, but they also saw something dangerous in this new, rogue faction. What had driven them to activate the weapon? Why now? Back on Earth, the leaders were in chaos. They had thought they were in control, that they could manage the situation, but now it seemed that their own creation had spiraled out of their grasp. This faction, which had been working in secret for years, had plans of their own. What had they learned during their time away from the public eye? What had they become? And most importantly, how had they managed to take control of the most destructive force humanity had ever created? As the fleets began to shift positions, everyone realized the same chilling truth. The war was no longer just between Earth and its enemies. Now, it was a fight for control of the weapon itself. The unknown species in uncharted space, the mysterious message from the rogue faction, and the looming threat of the Chur and other galactic powers, all of it was about to collide. With the weapon in play and the galaxy on the brink of full-scale war, the question was no longer whether humanity could survive, it was whether they could prevent their own destruction. Who would control the future of humanity? Would the rogue faction's vision come to pass, or would the galaxy burn before any of them could claim victory? As the fleets moved into position, each one preparing for a confrontation that could reshape the entire universe, a final, chilling transmission echoed across the stars. The end is near. Humanity will either rise or fall. And with that, the galaxy braced for the unknown as the fate of billions hung in the balance. The next move would be humanity's, but would they make the right one? Or would they, too, fall victim to the chaos they had unleashed? The clock was ticking, and no one knew who would emerge victorious. The galaxy stood at the precipice. Across the cosmos, fleets hovered at the ready, their weapons primed, their engines roaring with the power to change the fate of countless worlds. Earth's leaders, once so confident in their ability to control the course of events, now found themselves frantically scrambling to respond to the rogue faction that had seized control of the weapon. The Chur, the Narith, the colonies all were on high alert, waiting for the first move, unsure of who would strike first, and whether it would be the death blow to their ambitions or the beginning of a new chapter in the galaxy's history. As the rogue faction's fleet, now bolstered by the terrifying weapon, prepared to enter the fray, Earth's remaining leaders came to a grim realization: they had lost control. This faction, hidden for so long, learning from the shadows, had broken free from their grasp. Their motives were unclear, but one thing was certain: they wanted more than just survival. They wanted power. and they weren't going to stop until they had it. But even as Earth's leaders struggled to regain control, a new surprise emerged. The mysterious species from the uncharted regions of space, the ones who had broadcast their chilling message we have watched. We have learned. We are the next step began to make their move. Their arrival wasn't just a blip on the radar. It was a full-scale invasion. Their ships, sleek and mysterious, appeared in every sector of the galaxy, moving with an unsettling precision. This was no accidental emergence. They had planned this. They were not just here to observe, they were here to take what they believed was theirs. The Chur, fearing they were about to be caught in the crossfire, suddenly found themselves at odds with both the rogue faction and the new invaders. Their once unyielding confidence faltered as they realized that they were not just fighting humanity anymore, they were fighting a battle for their own survival. The Nereth, too, found themselves at a crossroads. Their interest in humanity's potential had always been tempered by caution, but now, facing an unknown threat more dangerous than anything they had imagined, they were forced to reconsider their own strategies. In a desperate bid for control, Earth's remaining commanders attempted to unite the fractured alliances and turn the tide against both the rogue faction and the newly arrived species. The weapon, though powerful, was unstable, and the rogue faction's leader, someone none of the galaxy's great powers had anticipated, had no intention of using it only once. They had already begun preparations to launch a catastrophic strike, one that would ensure humanity's dominance once and for all. But in doing so, they were playing a dangerous game, one that could destroy them all. The final confrontation was inevitable. The rogue faction, the Chur, the Nereth, and the mysterious invaders all collided in a single chaotic moment. Explosions shook the very fabric of space as fleets clashed in the void, and weapons of unimaginable power lit up the stars. Earth's leaders, desperate and broken, watched helplessly from their command centers, knowing that their fate was sealed by forces they could no longer control. Just as it seemed all hope was lost, a final, unexpected transmission came through the chaos. It was a human voice, but this time, it wasn't from any known faction. It was the voice of someone who'd been lost in the annals of history, someone who had been a part of Earth's military experiments decades ago, someone who had never been meant to be heard from again. Their words were simple, yet it changed everything. We are not what you think we are. We never were. And then, just like that, the weapon fired. But it wasn't a weapon of destruction. It was a weapon of evolution. As the blast radiated outward, the very fabric of space seemed to warp and shift. The fleets, the stars, the weapons, the battles, it all began to fade into something far more complex. Humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer about conquest, nor about survival. It was about something entirely different. A new force, one born from the depths of Earth's long-hidden secrets, was emerging, and it had the power to rewrite everything. The rogue faction, the invaders, even the Chur, they all looked on in horror as the reality of what was happening set in. The weapon had done what it was never meant to do. It had turned the very nature of existence upside down, and in doing so, humanity had become something beyond their reckoning. But what would this new reality mean for the galaxy? And would humanity, now forever altered, use its newfound power for good or for something darker? As the cosmos trembled under the weight of the changes humanity had set in motion, one question remained: would anyone survive the aftermath? The answer, it seemed, would have to wait. The galaxy, once bracing for the destruction that seemed inevitable, now found itself in the midst of a profound transformation. The weapon, which had been feared for its potential to annihilate entire civilizations, had instead opened a new chapter in the story of humanity and the cosmos. It was no longer a weapon of destruction, but a key to something far greater, a catalyst for evolution. Humanity had unknowingly crossed a threshold that no one could have predicted. As the shock waves of its awakening rippled outward, the very fabric of space began to stretch and bend, reshaping the future. At first, there was confusion. The fleets, who'd been ready to tear each other apart, now found themselves in a strange standoff. The Chur, once certain of their superiority, stood bewildered as they watched the changes unfold. The Nereth, who had long watched humanity from afar, now realized that the humans they had once seen as primitive were no longer the same. The mysterious invaders who had come to claim what they believed was theirs began to retreat, unsure of what to make of the new reality that had emerged. On Earth, the leaders who had struggled to maintain control now found themselves in a different kind of struggle, a moral one. They were no longer just trying to survive. They were trying to understand what humanity had become and whether they could navigate this new path without repeating the mistakes of the past. The rogue faction, whose ambitions had sparked so much chaos, had underestimated the true potential of the weapon they had unleashed. They had sought power, but what they had triggered was something far beyond their control. In the end, it was not power that humanity sought, it was evolution, understanding, and something far deeper. As the dust settled, Earth's leaders gathered to discuss their next steps. The weapon had given humanity something no other species in the galaxy had ever possessed: the ability to shape their own future, not through force or conquest, but through something more profound, the ability to transcend. It was clear now that humanity's true power lay not in destruction, but in transformation. The galaxy had watched in awe as Earth's once fragile species now stood at the center of a new era, its place in the cosmos forever altered. But as humanity began to rebuild, there were still questions left unanswered. Would they be able to navigate this new reality without losing themselves? Could they forge alliances with the other species, or would the old fears and rivalries rise again? The weapon had changed everything, but the challenges ahead were as daunting as ever. As leaders of Earth worked to forge new paths, one thing was certain: the galaxy would never be the same again. Humanity had survived the greatest of challenges, and in doing so, had unlocked a new potential. But with this power came a responsibility that no one could ignore. The choices they made would shape not just their future, but the future of all life in the galaxy. And so, as they looked to the stars, they knew one undeniable truth: